Kingslayer. Eager to get back into the arena after the Viper's poison fangs caught you, eh? Good. Well, have we got an opponent for you? Welcome to another round of Who's Better, Who's Worse. Today, by popular request, we're pitting everyone's favorite lovable bad boys of the world of ice and fire against each other. And the title they're competing over? Of course it's Who's the Better Warrior and who would win if they fought. Come on, what other category could it be with these two? Who's the better at sleeping with their close relatives? Don't forget to like and subscribe, Discord's here, and if you want to support us, you can do so over on Patreon, and get early access to next week's video. Anyway, links are in the description below. Now let's get crack-a-lacking, Tom. We'll be taking both fighters in their primes, of course, which for Jaime is obviously just before he loses his hand and suffers the atrophy of imprisonment, and for Daemon, it's a bit more complicated, as there are 2 points in time we could consider were his prime. The first being during his conquest of the Stepstones, and the second being when he kicked ass during the Dance of the Dragons. For this video, we're going to be taking Daemon during what we think is his first prime, that being after conquering the Stepstones, and we'll explain why in the books versus show section. Speaking of which, books or shows? We'll be honest, we'll be going with a rather messy setup outside of our normal parameters of books as primary and show as supplemental, or vice versa. This is due to one of the combatants. For Jaime, we're taking books all the way. No disrespect to Nikolai, he did a wonderful job portraying Jaime. But when it came to the martial stuff, he was no Viggo Mortensen, put it that way. Daemon, on the other hand, actually gets his fighting abilities and character in general fleshed out a hell of a lot more in House of the Dragon than he does in the books, due to the format of Fire and Blood. But we haven't seen him in action for the dance yet, hence why we're using Daemon during the Stepstones. So, to be clear, we're going books for Jaime and show for Daemon, with books and show sprinkled in respectively, as we feel this allows both characters to be represented by their strongest iteration, and it's what's most fair for both characters. Show Daemon would cream show Jaime, and there's not enough of the details we need in Fire and Blood to represent Daemon without making drastically wild assumptions. If you don't like it, tough! As for the word of God's thoughts, we're all well aware that Jaime is viewed by George as not just one of the best around for his time, but belongs to that very selective GOAT club in terms of raw ability, which only sports a few other members like Sandor and Aemon the Dragon Knight. Whereas Daemon has kind of been painted by the lore as more in line with warriors like Barristan Selmy, Robert Baratheon, and Arthur Dayne. That is to say, the very best around for his era specifically. Here are the categories we'll be judging these characters on, and at the end we'll make a decision on who we think is the better warrior, and who we think would win if they fight. Now let's kick things off with Physicality. Jaime is roughly 32 years old before he loses his hand, so easily in his physical prime, which is generally accepted to be between 25 to 35 for most biological males. Daemon enters the battle at 28 years old, so likewise firmly within his physical prime age-wise. Height-wise, Jaime is confirmed to be between 6 to 6'2", and due to having no exact book description of his height besides he's tall, and the fact we're using the show iteration, we'll have to go with Matt Smith's height for Daemon, which is just shy of 6 feet. So just about tall enough to be considered tall. Build-wise, Jaime is an absolute specimen of physical fitness, being heavily muscled, lean, and exceptionally strong, himself believing only beasts like Gregor and chads like Robert, Sandor, and Great John Umber to be stronger than him. For Daemon, once again we've got to go with Matt Smith's build, which I think is fair to say, pretty well built and lean and quite physically fit, though maybe not quite that bronze statue build Jaime has. As for who takes this one, honestly, it's nearly too close to call. And that's something you're going to be hearing a lot of in this video, so get used to me saying that. One day, height will be a factor, We promise. Someone just needs to give us a good matchup for the Hound or Brienne or Robert. But for now, the height difference between Daemon and Jaime isn't meaningful enough for a significant advantage, especially if Jaime is closer to 6 feet than 6 feet 2. And even at 6 feet 2, the difference, it really wouldn't matter. Likewise, age won't factor in due to both being well within their physical primes. The deciding factor will have to be their respective builds and what that could mean. Jaime is clearly the far stronger of the two, and Daemon might be a shade more agile due to his leanness. Speed-wise, they're likely to be comparable, and both have amazing feats of stamina and endurance, as evidenced with Jaime's fight against Brienne when he had next to nothing in the tank, and Daemon's marathon assault at the Stepstones when he went to kill that crab king bastard. But with that said, we're going to give Jaime a minor edge, just because his physicality has been noteworthy as something special, along with his being clearly the physically stronger of the two. Whereas Daemon's physicality hasn't warranted mention or comparison, and if he is more agile, it's likely to be marginal. Jaime takes this round. Now on to training and weapon specialization. Both Jaime and Daemon have a preference for and specialize in swordplay. Both are reputed as one of the best around during their eras, and both have come from the highest rungs of society. As such, both will have had the best possible training available to nobles. However, there is some disparity in their tutors. Daemon's teachers and Master of Arms aren't disclosed, so it's likely they weren't noteworthy. His father was a decent but not particularly skilled warrior of note, so I don't think there's any influence there. But it's definitely possible he picked up a thing or two from his grandfather, who actually was a skilled warrior of note, and incidentally the one who gave him Dark Sister. But in all likelihood, it's possible Daemon's exceptional level of skill is actually mostly self-honed through competitive experience and natural talent. Jaime's Master of Arms was likely Benedict Broom, and while he was probably decent, he's not the pinnacle of Jaime's professors of violence. All the Kingsguard of the Mad King's reign were notably skilled warriors who imparted their wisdom to Jaime. But the two names we're here for are Arthur motherfucking Dayne and Barristan the Badass Selmy. Both are legends, with Dayne being renowned as perhaps the greatest swordsman of his day, and Barristan's feats, they just speak for themselves. Needless to say, their wisdom and training would have been rather special indeed. While we don't know Dayne's opinion of Jaime, though it was likely positive, we know Barristan thought exceptionally highly of Jaime's abilities. Being considered the best by the best puts you into your own league, in all honesty. Jaime, like Daemon, is also a complete natural when it comes to swordplay, and has likely taught himself many tricks off of his own back. As for who takes this round, it's got to be Jaime. It's not a colossal edge, but it's definitely comfortable. Even if we discount the out-of-universe statements from George about Jaime being in the GOAT category when it comes to swordsmanship, he has been considered one of the best in two eras where the bar for greatness has been pretty fucking high. Daemon, by contrast, was his era's big cheese for sure, but in fairness, only really had one noteworthy contemporary who could rival his martial skill at this point in time, and only two came close throughout his whole lifetime, that being Sir Criston Cole and Aemond respectively, so the competition wasn't as fierce. While I do think Sir Criston is an absolute beast of a fighter, despite giving Ser Jorah a challenge for his crown of King of the Simps, he doesn't quite stack up to Selmy and Dayne for me personally, who are bona fide legends. I don't think the gap in skill is as massive as people may wish to make out, but Jaime definitely has the edge in weapon specialization and training. Moving on to versatility and adaptability. In terms of versatility and adaptability in terms of weaponry, there isn't much to say. Both have shown an innate preference for the sword, and somehow I think if we let Daemon have Caraxes, some people might construe that as potentially cheating. Fucking spoil sports. Both are fully trained and knighted nobles, and both are passionate warriors. As such, both are likely to have had training beyond just the sword. Axes, maces, warhammers, polearms, lances, bows, crossbows, they'll both know their way around them to a high standard. But come on! Ask them both what they'd want to take into a duel if they had the choice. The answer is clear. For their situational adaptability, we can look at the two scenes that draw the closest symmetry: Jaime's attempt to cut down Robb Stark, and Daemon's attempt to kill the crab feeder. Only one actually succeeded in cutting their way to their target, that being Daemon. But it should be noted he was likely done for without Corlys and Laenor's intervention. Side by side, both Jaime and Daemon cut through a similar amount of people, but both inevitably failed against impossible odds. It's just one of them got back up in time, and the other got their sword stuck in someone's head. So it's fair to say luck played a role in both circumstances. I'm not giving the edge to Daemon here, but this does say something for his fighting skill and his situational adaptability being close to on par with Jaime, that he can put in a similar performance against similarly bad odds. As for who takes this round, it's just too close to call. Both are in love with their swords, and neither is likely to tailor their equipment to their opponent. I'd like to offer the slightest edge to Daemon for actually pulling off his suicide run and making it to his target, but come on, look at this scene. Without the backup, he is completely fucked. Though we could still give him points for capitalizing on the moment and resuming his solo rampage to the crab feeder. But then you have to open the door to the questions. Well, what if someone had thrown Jaime another sword? Or would Jaime's sword have gotten stuck if it was also Valyrian steel like Dark's sister? Let's just call it dead even, Tom. I think that's what's most fair here. On to experience! Jaime has been in a few scuffs during his time as a Kingsguard, most notably fighting the Kingswood Brotherhood, where he fought and survived the Smiling Night at 15 years old, which was no mean feat. It's also practically a given he got to bloody his sword in the Greyjoy rebellions due to the fact the king he was sworn to protect needed fuck all protection at this point in time. And that's it. After that, because this absolute Chad knew how to keep the peace, it's mainly tourneys and potentially minor altercations where Jaime will have gained his experience and built his name as a great warrior. Most of his tenure as a Kingsguard was spent guarding a king who didn't really need guarding, and a king that did need guarding. But from Jaime himself. Seriously. For all the talk of how good Jaime is, there are very few instances of it being put truly to the test. As for Daemon, he also has tourney experience under his belt, but he fares much better on the real-world experience front, having commanded the City Watch for a year, which likely would have given him semi-regular run-ins with bandits and criminals to hone his skills, but the big one is he's got a 2-year war under his belt during his and Lord Velarion's conquest of the Stepstones, a war in which he took a command position and fought on the front lines, culminating in this badass moment. And that concludes his experience up to the point we're using him. Don't you give me those angry eyes, Daemon. It's youth or another war under your belt. Much like Jaime and his positive character development post losing his hand, you can't have both. Don't make me draw my sword. We all know I could take both you and Jaime at the same time. As for who takes this round, it's quite clearly Daemon. He may not have Oberyn's extensive resume, but he's definitely edging Jaime out for life and death combat experience. That's all there is to it, really. On to the next category, and that's fight IQ, cunning, and personality flaws. Covered this in our Jaime vs Oberyn video, but for a quick refresh, fight IQ is in the moment decision making when it comes to technique and exploiting defensive openings, cunning is underhanded and pre-planned tactics, and personality flaws, that speaks for itself. When it comes to fight IQ, these guys are both on point and score pretty damn high, but the truth is they are rather comparable. Both have cut through large swaths of opponents with their swords, and both have demonstrated they can hang with the top caliber fighters of their era. There's nothing to separate them here in all honesty. As for cunning, this is where Jaime loses a few points. He is capable of being cunning, but rather enjoys a fair contest for the most part and likes to win with overwhelming skill. It may be because he's very honorable and knightly, or it might be because he sees such tactics as beneath him. Daemon, on the other hand, is not quite Oberyn or Bronze level of underhanded, but is still quite cunning and gives absolutely no shits about fighting dirty, approaching near on every fight with a do whatever it takes to win mentality, which we saw plenty of during the Stepstones and during his altercation with Sir Criston. It doesn't matter if it's the sand on the ground or his half-broken shield, that shit is getting flung straight at your face if you're not ready for it. Haha, take that, Knight of the Simp. When it comes to personality flaws, Jaime isn't exactly what I'd call well-rounded. Before losing his hand, he is highly arrogant and prideful, happy to gloat, taunt and mock before the battle is even won. While he is one of the best, he is possessed of a certain overconfidence which leads to him constantly overestimating his abilities, as was evidenced when he tried to fight his way to Robb and when he thought he could take on the badass babe Brienne despite being highly dilapidated due to his imprisonment. He's also hot-headed, impulsive, and generally doesn't think ahead, preferring to act in the moment and worry about the knock-on effects later, along with not knowing when to keep his fucking mouth shut. You're witty, dude, we get it. Temper-wise? Jaime's got one, but we do have to give him credit. He does seem to be able to pull it back before losing total control. As for Daemon, he's basically a copy-paste of Jaime's personality flaws, except if Jaime's dial is at 10, Daemon's is cranked all the way up to 11. You don't get a moniker like the Rogue Prince for being a calm, rational dude. Daemon's arrogance and recklessness is off the scale, especially in the show. Something to note is that Cole didn't technically best him in the melee through superior fighting skill. He merely caught Daemon with a sucker punch because the Dragon Prince was celebrating prematurely. The starkest difference between Jaime and Daemon, however, is their tempers. Daemon is easily provoked, and once he's pissed, that's it. He's seeing red. Against your average no-name scrub, this might be fine. But against someone on your level as a combatant, you're basically begging them to exploit it. As for the winner of this round, like nearly every bloody round, it's almost too close to call. They're both prideful, arrogant, impulsive, and highly overconfident. They have roughly equal fight IQ from best we can tell, and while Daemon is certainly the more cunning of the two, Jaime, while not exactly a harbor of tranquil serenity himself, is still the more even-tempered and less easily provoked of the pair. But if there's a gun to our head, we're going to have to go with Jaime. While Daemon is more cunning, that temper of his is far too much of a crippling weakness. One that might actually be made worse by Jaime's cocksure attitude and verbal taunting. This isn't to say Jaime doesn't have a short fuse too, but like them both, I think we all know which bomb is going to go off first more often than not. Jaime takes this round. On to the final category, and that is equipment. Due to their social standing, both come to the battle in the best plate armor money can buy. While both warriors' armor is quite ostentatious, they are about as protected as you can be from slashing and thrusting weapons, like swords, knives, spears, arrows, etc. We should note, however, both seem to favor helmets that expose the face. This brings both pros and cons. Obviously, the biggest con is it's another weak point to strike at on top of the usual weak spots of plate armor, you know, the joints, backs of the knees and armpits, etc. But there is the advantage of not having your vision seriously hindered like you get with full face helmets. Swings and roundabouts, basically. And since both warriors bring a sword to the fight instead of something more canopy like a mace, warhammer or poleaxe, when it comes to scoring fatal wounds, both sides will really have to work for it. The pair have also made use of shields with their swords, so both have a defense redundancy on top of their armor, making them even more sword-proof. For fuck's sake, Tom, I don't want another round ending in, it's almost too close to call. Hopefully weapons gives us something to work with. And indeed it does. Daemon is rocking that oh-so-awesome magic metal, otherwise known as Valyrian steel, in Dark Sister, while Jaime is likely sporting the best castle-forged steel money can buy. There's a lot of myths about Valyrian steel and how it cuts through plate armor and other swords like cloth. This is nonsense, however, and Jorah and some fans are just talking hyperbole. If you want to know more, maybe check out this video we made on Dawn, Arthur Dayne's one-of-a-kind sword. We debunk its lightsaber properties and address Valyrian steel in it also. But while Valyrian steel isn't a lightsaber, it certainly makes a significant difference to fighting output due to it being lighter, more nimble, nigh on unbreakable, and never losing its edge, meaning you can be more reckless with it. Dawn has comparable properties to Valyrian steel, and between Arthur Dayne and Barristan Selmy, who are considered dead equals, that sword alone apparently makes the difference between 50-50 and Dayne decisively winning. Dark Sister is a difference maker, no two ways about it. On top of this, both are likely to have some kind of dagger on them. It's just kind of standard when fighting plate-armored foes to have one, as plate-armored duels normally progress to wrestling and getting up close. And we have seen both these characters use one, so even for the character specifically, I'm not just pulling that out of my arse. As for who takes this round, obviously it's Daemon, no question. He's got the magic sword, and no amount of gold on Jaime's hilt can change that. Unless Jaime wishes to trade his sword hand for Oathkeeper. Would you like to do that, Kingslayer? Nope, didn't think so. And with all that wrapped up, we're at the conclusion. Who is the better warrior? Who would win if they fought? This really is one of those who's got the sun in their eyes kind of matchups. And by that we mean the circumstances of the day, and who's on it like a car bonnet, and who's having an off day, will make more of a difference than the small disparity in their fighting skill. What some people forget is that skill has a ceiling as to what it can accomplish, and the closer you get to the top, the more marginal that disparity becomes. With these two, there's no anti-meta going against the meta dynamic like there is with Jaime versus Oberyn, or the Mountain versus Oberyn, or Brienne versus Oberyn, or basically anyone versus Oberyn. Nor is there a rock-paper-scissors dynamic like you get with Robert Baratheon versus the Mountain that you can apply to try and eke out a decisive winner. It's close, and whoever takes this would be taking it 6 times in 10. They wouldn't be full sweeping it. I think we can comfortably say Jaime is the more skilled of the two due to his teachers and out-of-universe statements, but Daemon isn't lagging behind to the degree he can't at least keep up. He's accomplished similar feats at the end of the day, especially his show counterpart, which, to remind you all, is the iteration we're using for Daemon. Then we have to ask the question, just how big of a difference does a Valyrian steel sword make? And how much of a skill gap can it make up for? Is it enough to bridge the gap between Daemon and Jaime? Going by the decisive difference Dawn makes for Selmy versus Dayne, I would honestly have to say that, yes, in my opinion, and stressing in my opinion that guy, I think it probably does. For us, this fight is decided not on physicality, not on skill, not on equipment, but on the respective fighter's psychology. Both are arrogant, egotistical, impulsive jackasses. But if you were to light both of their fuses, Daemon's likely the first to explode into a reckless anger more often than not. He's just too easily provoked. And if there's one thing Jaime can do better than wield a sword, it's get under people's skin. Sometimes this will backfire on Jaime badly. Make no mistake, and he may get blindsided by Daemon's fury, or potentially provoked himself into a similar reckless anger, which would revert the odds back to a coin flip. But we think the Kingslayer has just enough restraint, just enough fighting instinct, and just enough skill to capitalize on the moment, remaining level-headed and using Daemon's own fury against himself in order to place his sword into an exposed opening in Daemon's armor. At least one more time in 10 than Daemon at the very minimum. As this matchup, and some might even say this YouTube channel shows, sometimes it can pay to be an irritating, highly obnoxious douchebag. Take heart, Kingslayer, for you may have succumbed to the poison fangs of the Viper. but you can hold your head high knowing you have it in you to slay a dragon. Sir Jaime Lannister, you are the better warrior.
Daemon is my favorite, so he should be the winner.
It seems our green site is getting stronger, Tom. The negative crybaby comments are arriving before the video has even concluded. I need another drink of that blue stuff, please, to help me calm my nerves. That's better. And that's our take. Feel free to let us know your thoughts down below. Do you agree it's close, or